Okay, everybody, welcome back. Hope I get this video in this morning. Follow up a couple things from the previous video. Alcal on Board Game Geek pointed something out to me. If you're watching this video, I think you probably know that this GIUK gap here was the SOSUS line that was a way of trying to detect Soviet submarines more efficiently. In game terms, when a Soviet submarine crosses this line, if there is a fresh, meaning unspent submarine in this sea zone, it can make an attack against that Soviet sub. It has a couple different options for how to do that. The reason it's important here is that this unit that NATO put on patrol doesn't need to be on patrol in this sea zone. It gets to act as if it's on patrol. And so what NATO's going to do instead is move this sub into the Norwegian Sea on patrol, because an on patrol submarine gets a chance to strike at a submarine or at a task force that moves into the sea zone. So that might give us a shot later at the Soviet task force. I also forgot to show you how to do weather. I've already rolled weather, and for this game it's all clear, but I'm going to show you how it works. Up here in the upper right is the weather table for the North Sea Zone. You see there's North 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you roll a single die and you get a 2. That means all the sea zones are clear. If you had rolled and gotten a 10, for instance, you would then roll 3 more dice. 3 dice, 2, 3, 6, and you would look for any sea zones with those numbers and mark those with bad weather. So North 1, 2, the Baltic would have bad weather. North 3, 4 would have bad weather. And North 5, 6 would have bad weather. If you get doubles, like if you get 6, 6 or a 5 and a 6, you only put one bad weather marker in. There's only one kind of bad weather. That's how it works. And so you see there's some bad weather down here in the East Sea Zone, which won't matter in this scenario. But there's bad weather up here, which could potentially matter. Okay, and you do that every turn, at the beginning of the turn, determine weather for any sea zones that are in play. All right, so we ended with NATO using an operations point to put a sub on patrol, and now it is the Soviets' turn. And the Soviets, as I said before, these damaged bases here prevent NATO fighters from being out on intercept missions in these sea zones here. And so the Soviet airstrike, the Soviet strike aircraft on the Kola have a relatively unimpeded path to get into the East 6 Sea Zone. And since they have a good detection on this task force here, that is what they're going to do. So the Soviets are going to activate 2 fighters. Each fighter is going to cost an operation point. You can activate multiple strikes. You can activate multiple strike aircraft for any airstrike, and you pay 1 op point per strike aircraft. If you have fighters that are going to be escorts, the fighters can fly as escorts for free. They don't cost extra operational points. So here you see the counter, the upper right-hand part of the counter. The 6 and the 3 are the number of missiles this aircraft fires. The 6 is at regular range, and the 3 is at extended range. And you see that the fighter's range is a 2 is its normal range, and it can fly extended range 3. So these fighters, or these strike aircraft, can put drop tanks on and fly farther at the expense of having some missiles. And in fact, that's what they have to do for this attack. So they're going to go ahead and fly out here for 1, out here for 2. The campaign game and other scenarios include tanker aircraft, and if you have tankers, they will extend the range. We don't have tankers here, so I won't explain that. So they're now going to move 3. So as before, when the patrol aircraft entered the sea zone where there were fighters on combat air patrol, the NATO fighters now have a chance to interdict this strike. You're going to want to refer to the brown player aid. I call it brown. It's got air attacks by fighters, cap, and interception above it. So 1 fighter per strike aircraft is allowed to attack. The task force that's under attack has to use its fighters if there are no better fighters that can be employed. In this case, there aren't any better fighters than the Tomcats, so that's what we're going to use. So the Task Force Ranger has 1 unit of fighters, and they're going to attack, and Task Force Task Force Viking has a unit of fighters, and they're going to attack. And we'll see what happens. So, Task Force Rangers fighters, time crits are going to roll 4 dice with a +2 modifier. So here we go. 5, 10, 6, 10. So those are super good rolls. If you look at the fighter versus strike aircraft cap and intercept column, you're going to see that natural 10 is a cap kill before launch, and and in this case the 6 is modified to an 8, so that's going to be a hit. So this is potentially 3 hits that the Russians would have to take, 2 of them before they launch their missiles. However, it also says on the player aid, saves against cap kills. So anytime that combat air patrol scores a hit against strike aircraft, the fighter has a chance to save against them. And it shows this on the player aid. If the task force that launched the fighters is in good detection status, any hit can be saved on a roll of 6 or higher. So we have 3 hits here, and so these strike aircraft are going to roll 3 saving throws, and none of them save. So that's not good. So both aircraft are going to flip to their damaged side. They've taken those hits, and those kills happen before missiles are launched. Now the fighters from Task Force Viking are able to launch some missiles, and they're going to go ahead and do that. Double 6, 8, 9. So that was bad for the Soviets. The American combat air patrol chewed them up. Another thing that it indicates on the player aid and in the rules is that depending on the detection status of the combat air patrol task force, the saves are different. If the task force has poor detection, it is the saves are 8+. If the task force is not detected that the combat air patrol aircraft are flying from, then there is no saving throw available. So we're going to have 8, 8, modified 8, modified 8, modified 10, modified 11. So these aircraft are going to be destroyed, but they get to launch their missiles first. So at extended range, each of these damaged Badger elements get to launch 4 missiles. And the missiles are flying at this task force. And so now we're going to go to the blue player aid. And the blue player aid on the side that says Task Force, Detection, Missile Attacks, and Damage. On the right-hand side, Missile Attacks against Task Forces. So here is how you resolve the defense. There are 4 missiles coming in. You total up the surface-to-air missile value of the task force. The US-1 has 4 SAMs, and the US-7 has 1, so it's a total of 5 SAMs. That's what they can shoot. If you look at the player aid, it says incoming missiles 1 to 5, SAM shots allowed, number of incoming missiles +1. So there are 4 missiles on their way. This task force can shoot a maximum of 5 surface-to-air missiles. That's exactly how many it has. If this task force had a SAM value of 10, it would still only be allowed to shoot 5 at the incoming missiles. And that has to do, the designer talks in the rules about how that has to do with ammunition tracking and things like that. So now the task force is going to roll 5 dice against the 4 incoming missiles. And here we go with that. There's a 4, 7, 8. And a 3 and a 7. If you look at the player aid, it talks about, it says you roll 1 die per SAM point, apply any DRMs. None of these DRMs apply to this particular situation, so they're just straight rolls. So we have a die roll of 1 to 2 means the SAM misses, a die roll of 3 to 8 means it takes out a single missile, and a die roll of 9 to 10 means it takes out 2 of the incoming missiles. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hits, and that means all 4 of the missiles are sunk. And So no damage to the NATO task force, and the Soviet aircraft have been chewed to pieces by the American fighters. I guess Maverick was out there rolling. And that's going to cost the Soviets 2 operations points right there. And now, as I indicated before, we have the repair event because both operations point counters are at or below 8. And so automatically remove 1 damage from each damaged facility. And now these facilities are now back in action, and they can contribute to the fight. And so it is a NATO action to use an operations point, and that was a bad turn for the Soviets. I thought that might work out better for them. Later we'll have some more missile combat. You'll see how that goes. So normally in this situation I would start putting fighters out here to have them be on patrol against Russian strike aircraft, but I don't really have to worry about that too much anymore. So instead, what I think I'm going to do is start sending out my maritime patrol aircraft to try to keep an eye on Russian subs and possibly detect task forces. So down here in France, we got a couple of these Atlantique craft. This Atlantique is going. No, I'm going to use this one. Yeah, no, I'll use this one. Is going to fly out 1, 2. And it's going to be on patrol. Now, there are on patrol markers, but you don't need to mark aircraft on patrol because if there's an airplane flying around in a sea zone, it has to be on patrol. It can't be there in any other way. So this maritime patrol aircraft is on patrol looking for Russians, and the American operations marker now drops down to 7. And so both markers are on the 7, and that means there is a ship's action coming up. And again, ship's actions are fairly complex. Not complex, they're time consuming. And I'm getting ready to go to work. So I'm going to end this video here, this brief video. And one thing that I want to make sure I'm right about here, if anybody's watching this, for each strike aircraft that's part of a strike package, 1 fighter unit can roll to defend it. So that's why I believe that the fighters from both of these task forces were able to act, because again, it's not, these are long-range missile attacks, right? So the American forces say, hey, there's a strike incoming, we've got to go get them, and any available aircraft in the area will go to fight off the attack if they can. But I could be wrong about that, and it could be that only the targeted task force is allowed to contribute its fighters. If I made that mistake, then I'm going to have to come back and put some Russian strike aircraft back on the map. But I think I got that right, and so you can let me know about that if you've played the game. And that's going to be all for this video. The next video will show the ship's action. Take care.